Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff this week on the show. It's kind of a grab bag style week because I was traveling last week. There was a podcast. We did not record though last week. It was a pre-recorded one. So we are kind of catching up today. Going to be talking about some stuff. Going to be talking about some games. We've both played Hitman 3. You have not beat Hitman 3 yet. I did last night. We'll talk about that a little bit. Spoiler-free Hitman 3 impressions. Probably talk about some other video games. Probably talk about a little bit of news. And it'll just be a fun one. Kind of a catch-up episode.
Yeah. It's a classic, early year kind of podcast. There's not a lot of stuff going on. So yeah. Let's just shoot the shit.
Let's do it. So, Sean, what have you been up to these last couple weeks? I have some stories because I had a very bad road trip. And I'm in the middle of some interesting life stuff with school that I can tell people about. But what have you been up to?
Yeah, so for me, like nothing, no specific stories, just the general stress of going back to remote hybrid learning, whatever we call it. So I'm our district has readopted the hybrid schedule we had for the majority of the first semester. So it's the half my students are in the building, half of them are at home, and then you switch off halfway through the week, all that kind of stuff. And so that's one of the main reasons why I haven't put a huge amount of time into Hitman 3 yet, is just that transition is hard to deal with no matter what. It's particularly frustrating when they had basically said that we would be full remote for the entirety of January, and then all of a sudden we had a meeting out of nowhere, then they said, no, actually we're going hybrid the last week of January. And it's well, you guys said at the end of last semester that we'd be remote for all of January, and then now you've just sort of unilaterally decided that would not be the case anymore. So it's well, shit, now everyone has to figure out what their lesson plans are going to be, how do you convert everything to have half the class be in person, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's just been a lot of dealing with weird logistics around that kind of week for me.
That sucks, Sean. I gotta say, though, I was partially distracted from what you were saying because I don't know if it's just Zoom or something, but you've got like a semi-pompadour going on, and it's making me think of the character Osugi in 13 Sentinels, and now I just want that in everyone's head while they're watching listening to this episode, that you don't know what Sean looks like. Usually maybe you just picture Hatsune Miku because of his Twitter avatar. Picture the dude from 13 Sentinels.
Yeah, I think that's an effect of you not seeing the depth there, so it's
Okay.
It's not actually sticking forward. But if you want to picture that, that's good with me.
I don't know.
It would have been a more fun week if I had decided to do in-person teaching with a pompadour on,
and also like a school uniform jacket and halfway hunched over with your hands in your pockets, mm-hmm. and just going everyone, oh man.
Yeah. I just do the whole lesson in Japanese. Just don't even address it. See if they can keep up.
Do you ever do that? Just yell at your kids in Japanese and see if they know what you're saying?
No, okay. I don't never yell at my students in Japanese.
I would do that, but I'm not a high school teacher. Maybe that's why.
That might be why they might screen for. Do you yell at students in a foreign language they don't understand? Is one of the screening questions at the interviews.
All right. So, Sean, I had a hell of a week last week because while we would normally have been recording, I was still on the road 3 days after I thought I would be back in Iowa because I am cursed when it comes to cars. Mm-hmm. You know a little bit about this, Sean, the number of bad cars I have gone through. I am 28 years old. I have only been driving for 12 years. I have owned 4 cars. That is too many cars. And it's because most of them have been shit. I started with a Ford Explorer, and we got that for $600 from my mom's old workplace because they needed to get rid of it, and it was they could either junk it or sell us to us for the Kelly Blue Book value, and so we got that. That car, actually, that was the best car I owned for a long time, but eventually I had to give that up. Then I got this Toyota that I loved. It was an old, white 1991 Toyota. It was really good, except one day it stopped running a little bit, and we took it in, and we found out that the entire axle had cracked, and that at any moment the car could have, literally while I was going 60 miles an hour, it could have just stopped and flung me out the windshield. And so it was kind of lucky that it stopped, and that car was totaled for nothing happening. Then I had this red little car called a Mercury Mystique. That car was a piece of fucking shit. The air conditioning went out like a week after I bought it, and it would have cost thousands of dollars to fix it. And I had to. That was the car that was my main commute vehicle from Boulder to Golden for years, and I hated every. It was also way too small for me. It was like a car for 5 foot tall people, and I'm 6'3". Anyway, I've had bad luck. When I had a full-time job a couple years ago, I finally bought a real car. I bought a 2009 Subaru Outback. You know, like I have a lease on it. No, not a lease. I own the car. I have a. It's not a mortgage. A loan. So you know, I pay for it every month. So you know, real car ownership, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought. Yeah, and I thought, you know, maybe the problems would stop. Maybe the problems would stop. No, I've had a lot of problems with that car. I don't want to get into all of them. Some of them have been my fault. Lots of them haven't been. I take pretty good care of it. This week, though, I was prepared. So last week, I was preparing to come back to Iowa from Colorado. And I try to make the drive all in one day, especially now in the time of COVID, because, you know, I don't want to have to, like, make a stop at a hotel or something. Not that hotels are super dirty, but you just, you know, you want to be safe. And so on Tuesday of that week, I was going to leave Friday. On Tuesday, I go and get an oil change in the morning. And everything goes fine. But then they say, hey, while we were changing your oil, we noticed you had a pretty low transmission fluid, so we think there's a leak there. And I'm like, oh, shit. And they're like, it's not actually that bad. It's just something in the pan. They probably just have to replace that. Get it to any transmission shop. You'll be fine. And I'm like, okay, cool. Good to know this before I leave on the road, right? So I go to a transmission shop later that day that's like right by my house. It's like a 5-minute drive. I drop the car off. They're like, okay, we'll let you know later today if what we're going to do to this car. I'm like, okay. They never call me back. So I call back in the morning and I'm like, hey, what happened? And they're like, oh, we're going to look at it soon. And I'm like, I need to leave by Friday. If you could like just like look at it today, that'd be great. And I'm like, okay, we'll call you back in a couple hours. They never call me back. This is a persistent thing with this shop. They, over the course of like the 4 days it is in their shop for a very simple fix, they never call me back once, and I always have to call them. Anyway, it was supposed to be fixed Wednesday. It was supposed to be fixed Thursday. It never gets fixed until Friday afternoon, which is when I was supposed to have already left by. So I've already had to push my trip back a day. They finally fix it, and I come by, and I'm like, okay, what's the damage? And they're telling me everything, and they fixed it, and they're like, oh, but we also noticed an oil leak. And I'm like, good God, what is happening? And apparently it's not the worst oil leak in the world, but it's like something to keep an eye on. So before I leave on my road trip, I also go buy a couple quarts of oil. I've got that in the back of my car. Every time I stop on the road trip, I have to check my dipstick and just make sure I'm okay and top off the oil. If it's not, I make it home okay with that. But I'm thinking at this point, okay, I have checked everything. This car, it seems like at least I know what's wrong with it. I'm going to get home. This should be fine. So I start my drive Saturday morning. This is a drive I have done dozens of times in my life. When I was a kid, not driving, with my parents driving, I drive it all the time now. I'm pretty good at it. I was pretty well on a roll, too. I was a little bit outside Kearney, Nebraska, which is literally exactly the halfway point, because it's an 800-mile drive, and that's 400 miles. So I'm a little outside Kearney. It's like 4 o'clock p.m. Local time, and I'm making pretty good time. I could be home by like 10, 11 o'clock. This is pretty good, and I'm on a roll. It starts snowing a little bit, and I have a spot on my windshield that is not getting clean. There's something up with my windshield wiper. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to pull off at this rest stop, and I'm going to just adjust that windshield wiper and scrape off some ice. And as I pull off, I hear a ba-chung, and I'm like, something's wrong. And I pull over, and I go and look, and my back tire is literally deflating before my eyes. Like, it is shrinking. It's not a slow leak.
Yeah, it's like you pop that fucking thing.
I popped that fucking thing. And I'm like, fuck, because it is Saturday night. It is 4 o'clock p.m. Most, like, auto shops close at 5 or 6 everywhere in the United States, and most of them are not open Sundays. And I'm not even in the city limits yet. It's like, fuck. I'm like, okay, normally I would call AAA for this. I have AAA. It's just, especially like in the winter and everything, it's a little safer to have an expert do it, and replace your spare. But I'm like, it'll take AAA at least an hour to get here. I'm going to try to change this thing myself. So I get all the stuff out. I get my spare out. I get the jack and everything. And I've got everything set up. And I cannot get the lug nuts off the tire. I just can't get it off. I don't know if it's because it's cold. Obviously, I only have the tool that is with the spare tire, which is the hand crank, which is not that powerful. But I could not get those things off. So I'm like, okay, fuck. I call AAA. AAA comes. They have a power tool that does it automatically. So it's very easy. They put my spare on. Thank God my spare was in good condition. And luckily, I'm pretty close to Kearney, Nebraska. I'm like 5 miles from the first exit. But at this point, nothing's going to be open. I have to get a hotel. So I get a hotel. The scariest 10 minutes of driving in my life were driving in the snow on a spare tire on an interstate trying to get to the exit, because spare tires you shouldn't really take on the highway at all. You're not supposed to go over 50 miles an hour. So I'm going like 40 miles on the highway in this thing with my hazards on. Get to the hotel. I have to spend the whole night there. Luckily, this is like the luckiest part of all of this, is there's a Walmart nearby. Normally, having a Walmart nearby is not lucky, but it is because they are the only auto shop that is also open on Sundays. Yay, capitalism. So I am able to get there in the morning and get a new tire. At this point, it's kind of funny, Sean. I had given my tire like a once-over, the blown tire, and I had seen like the puncture, and it looked to me like a rock had lodged in there, but from the outside, it didn't look that bad. And I'm like, maybe they can patch this tire. So when I bring it into Walmart the next morning, I ask them if they can patch this, like check if you can patch it. If not, I'll buy a new tire. That's fine. The guy comes in 10 minutes later to like the waiting room and is like, well, we can't patch it, and I wanted to show you why. He found this so funny he needed to bring it in. From the outside, it didn't look that bad. If you pull out like the wheel well and everything and look inside, it was a giant chunk of metal in like a long, it looked like something you would take and stab someone in prison with. It was this long chunk of shrapnel that was also really thick, and it was like 8 or 9 inches long, that had gone all the way through the tire. If I had pulled that thing out, I could have killed someone with it. It was like hilarious that this, and I don't know. So
you basically drove over a knife in the road, more or less.
Basically, yeah. I drove over this gnarly fucking piece of shrapnel. So I have to buy a new tire. I buy a new tire. I get that on. They check. I'm all good to go. And finally, at like 10 a.m. on Sunday, I'm able to get back on the road and get back home that night. But basically, I just had a solid week of dealing with car shit that climaxed with me blowing a tire right smack dab in the middle of my drive on a Saturday night. That really sucked.
Yeah, I have been pretty fortunate. I mean, I don't do the amount of driving that you do, because I typically have not like driven out of the state.
Yeah.
But I have been pretty lucky overall with car stuff. But yes, it has been an amusing thing being your friend and seeing, the like parade of like random car bullshit that you have to deal with on like an incredibly regular basis.
Yeah, like when I learned about the oil leak, I said to my brother, I'm like, I am fucking cursed when it comes to cars. And he's like, oh, don't be dramatic. It's the bad stuff happens. I'm like, no, I'm cursed. And he's like, eh. And then when my tire blew, I like almost a higher priority than calling AAA was me calling Thomas to go, I fucking told you so. I fucking told you.
That's the twist of the story, is that you put the piece of shrapnel in the road and you drove over it on purpose just to prove a point.
No, but that was my week there. And this was all me getting home so that I can take a test. Really a series of tests, because I know I've talked to you off the air about this, Sean, but I don't think I've really told my listeners much about what I'm doing right now. Tomorrow, like 24 hours from when we are recording this episode, I will be in the middle of taking my comprehensive exams for my PhD program. This is a part I don't know how they do it in the sciences, but in the humanities, this is how most PhDs are done. You have your dissertation at the end, but the stage before your dissertation is called comprehensive exams. And the whole idea is you, in consultation with your like advisors and stuff, is you create a number of research areas that you want to claim comprehensive like expertise in. And then you create reading lists, which is lists of books, articles, and in the case of film studies, films, because films are also relevant, that you are saying, I want you guys to test me on this stuff to prove that I'm an expert in this area. And it is one of the more stressful parts of any PhD program, because you are responsible for reading like dozens of books. You know, I had about 100 articles on mine, had about 100 films, all of this stuff. And then it is 3 tests that are each 4 hours long, and they are composition, so you're writing. I still don't exactly know what it looks like because I've never done this before. It's not a standardized test. There's no book to go there's no ACT study guide for this. There's only friends I can ask, but basically my committee creates questions, and then normally they would put me in a room and have me do this, but because of COVID, they're just going to email me it, and it's kind of a take-home test that I have to send back within 4 hours. But yeah, so I'll get questions and I'll be writing, and I have 2 this week and 1 the week after that, and they're all 4-hour sittings. So a total of 12 hours, a full half day of exams on this stuff. And I have been spending the last several months, if you've been noticing on Twitter, I've been doing a lot of academic rants. That is because, let me pick something up here, Sean. These are my notes for my comps. I have 2 big binders of handwritten notes. These are on films because I basically take notes by hand when I'm watching movies. And then I have 3 binders that I made, books of all my typed notes that I printed out, because once you have 700 pages of typed notes, it's not that useful to look at them on a computer. So they are all printed out, and now I have gone through my notes a second time by hand and put sticky notes and stuff in there so I can easily reference stuff and be able to study better. This is by far the most I've ever prepared for a test, which is probably good, because
if you had done that level of preparation for any other test in your life, it would have been beyond the level of overkill, right?
Yes.
It would be hilarious for you to go into the ACT and be like, I have 7 entire handwritten notebooks of notes for the ACT. If you did that and didn't get a perfect score, there'd be something wrong.
Exactly. So anyway, that has been my life lately. I have been in daily study mode since October. And before then I was in pretty regular, getting materials together and checking stuff out and trying to finalize my lists. But I have been almost without missing a day doing some reading, some viewing, something since October. I don't have it here with me anymore, but I did have a whiteboard that I was using to count down the number of days until the exam and the number of things I still had to check off my lists. It's to 0 now, so I've erased it all. I just better fucking be to 0. I have to have the test in 24 hours. Less than that. It starts at noon. 21 hours and 40 minutes. So yeah, that has been my life. It's been interesting. I've learned a lot. It's also a little stressful. I'm excited for it to be done. Frankly, I'm glad, Sean, we have this podcast today just so I can think about something else for a couple hours. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because one thing, I know, I literally taught standardized testing to kids for years. And, one of my number 1 tips about test taking is the day before the test, don't think about the test too much.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I'm glad we have this podcast today.
Yeah, well, you going through all of that stuff reminded me of because I had blanked on everything that had happened to me in the past week at work, but now you talking about all your car trouble bullshit has reminded me that I did have a very weird week where it was every single day something weird and out of nowhere happened. Where on Monday we had this huge meeting with the whole English department had this big meeting, and it was one of the most excruciating meetings of my life, where it was supposed to be an hour. It ultimately ended up being about 100 minutes long, and mostly nothing happened because I'm sure everyone who's worked a job has had this experience where you get into a meeting, there's a lot of tensions going into the meeting because of COVID and all, going back early, all this kind of stuff. And about 10 minutes into the meeting, you realize this is going to get fucked. This is just not going to go anywhere productive. And it was this slow realization of people are slightly too emotional. There's just we had someone from admin was in the meeting, and it was just they said one thing that then spiraled someone else to make a comment that was maybe a little bit too harshly worded. And it's everyone's well-intentioned, and then slowly it starts spiraling out of control, and you're just sitting there on a computer staring at all this being well, we were basically, all we really needed to do was come up with a common assessment for a thing as the department. And now, we're having, this weird, philosophical conversation about what it means to do assessments in high school. And it's oh my God. Oh, this thing. I was very happy that I went home early, right after lunch, because we don't have classes for basically the last 2 hours of the day, to do the meeting from home on my home laptop, because I would have been at the school at 4 o'clock if I had not done that, because it's just this long meeting. And then the next day, part of that meeting is like there's like lots of weird budget stuff going on because there is for every school. So that's where a lot of the tension comes up. The next day I go to school and go to my room, and I show up about like 30 minutes early every day to get like stuff ready, especially with like I don't spend as much time at the school building because I want to not be around people as much as possible with COVID. And I put my key in the lock, and I turn the key, and the lock doesn't move. And it's like immediately I'm like, there's like a lot, what the fuck is possibly be happening here? And because of like all the budget stuff, my mind immediately goes to the most paranoid place of like, did they like secretly fire everybody because of our weird English department meeting? Like, what's going on? And it's like I go upstairs and go to the admin, like, so I don't even know who I'm supposed to talk to about this. I'm not entirely sure what's going on, but we're going to have students showing up in about 30 minutes, and my key doesn't unlock my door. And then it was like someone being like, oh, well, here, let's check. That's really weird. Here, like, let's go grab, because my room is right by the admin. So it's like someone is like, oh, here, let's check my key because I have the key to that area of the building. It's like, oh, nope, key doesn't work either. That's weird. And it's like a procession of like 3 people until eventually we have to get the maintenance guy come down because he was working on something else in another room. And he's just like, no, your lock's just broken. I'm like, what do you mean my lock's broken? It's like, it just broke. We don't know. And he just like pops the lock open. It's like, well, you're not going to be able to lock this lock until we get somebody in here. And so I'm like, oh, okay, that's weird. It's like, I just will make sure I have my doorstop on my door the whole time and remember not to lock the door when I go to the bathroom. And then it was like during 4th hour that day, with the maintenance dude and someone else was on there like working on the lock while I'm trying to talk about fucking Macbeth or some shit. And that was that was just a very weird day where you'd never expect to show up and put your key in a lock that you have unlocked like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times at this point, and just like you turn and like nothing happens. You're like, there's no possible way that this is the wrong key or anything like that. And I have never in my life had a lock just break for no apparent reason when it had worked totally fine the day before.
So no one has ever done for us, none of our fans have ever done the like animated adventure style like version of one of our stories where they animate to our vocals. I want it for this story, just for the moment where you're teaching while the maintenance guy is there, and I want it to say on the board behind you, fucking Macbeth or some shit.
Yeah. Because that's what it felt like. Like, it's so hard to teach something when you're like distracted by that. It's like, what's going on with this lock? Like, what could have possibly happened? And then the day after that, I showed up for my first period class, and all the students come in. One student shows up like 2 minutes late, sits down, and then refuses to do anything. And like after a couple minutes of that, I go up and like, hey, can you get your like notebook out? Or it's like and kind of like non-responsive. I'm like, okay, here, I'll give you some, because it was a freshman, so it's like sometimes they show up, they don't have paper or pencil or whatever, so it's like I give the student a notebook that I have a bunch of spare ones in the room and a pencil, and then they just kind of sit there with it, not do anything. And then like 1 minute later, they raise their hand and say, Mister, can I go to the bathroom? And I'm like, well, we can't go to the bathroom until like we have like a set time when classes can go to the bathroom, because you don't want a bunch of students from different classes like passing the bathroom and that kind of stuff because of COVID. So like, no, like we've got our set time. But then I was like, in my head, it's like, well, maybe it would be fine to let this one student first period. But it was like, we were literally just about to watch a video that was like a 10-minute long video. I was like, well, wait until the video's done, because if you miss the whole video, then you're not going to be able to do all the shit we're going to do right afterwards. Obviously didn't use the word shit with the student. And then the student's just like, fine. And then I go to start playing the video, and then the student just grabs their backpack, gets up, and walks out of the room. I'm like, well, okay. And then I have to call security and have the security track down the student, figure out what's going on. Is like, do we really have to start this on like your first day back to remote? Like, can we not do this? Can we like, it was weird because I had definitely had stuff like that happen last year, but with COVID, like part of the effect of having only half of the students in the room and like masks on and all that kind of stuff is it cuts down on like behavioral issues like that tremendously. So I hadn't had to deal with something like that this entire school year. It was just like immediately like, oh man, freshmen, like something like, I guess some like every once in a while, like something will get through, and it's just like, just get up and walk in, leave the room. And now like, great. Now you've got like detention. Now you've got all this stuff.
And my instinct is
to deal with.
It's funny, but I also feel bad because who the hell? Mm-hmm. I mean, My reaction, Sean, would have been like, look, kid, none of us want to be here. This fucking sucks. Everything sucks. We get it. But yeah,
it's like, but I've got like 10 other kids in here that I need to
Right.
be paying attention to. It's like I can't spend my whole day figuring out
Yeah.
what's going on with your situation because there's a lot
But
of other
yeah.
situations. It's like I just want to be like, come on, man. My lock was broken yesterday. Like I don't want to deal with this today. I want to have a normal day for my first week back in
Right.
like remote or hybrid learning stuff.
It's tough. I mean, freshmen haven't learned empathy yet, right? Like that part of
Yeah.
the brain hasn't developed.
Well, I mean, and
So-
specifically, I mean, these kids have not had like relatively normal schooling since they were their first semester, 8th grade, right?
I feel
they
so
went through
bad. God, when you
second
put it that
semester,
way.
8th grade, and the full first semester of 9th grade. Their first full semester in high school was entirely like all over the place. So yeah, I'm surprised that I have had more of that kind of like rebellious type behavioral stuff. But there was something about this is like,
can you
I would have
imagine?
been prepared for it if it was like the next week. It was like not this week, not when I'm already dealing with all this other stuff and like weird tensions in the department and my
Yeah.
lock being broken and all kinds of nonsense.
I'm trying to think back to like when we were ninth graders and like if we had, I literally can't even imagine it. I mean, part of it is just like the technological landscape was so different. Neither of us owned smartphones.
Yeah,
Just the whole way remote learning would be done would have been different. You wouldn't have the expectation students would own laptops in 2007. Yeah. Anyway, we're getting off track, but man, I had my first week back at classes too. I'm kind of excited about this semester. I'm teaching a very different class. Usually I'm doing intro to film. I am TAing a class on video games this semester. And
Nice.
It's a class called Video Games and Identity, and it's students from all over the university because it fulfills a diversity and inclusion requirement for undergrads, because we talk about identity as it relates to video games and stuff. Very simple topic, not controversial. No one ever gets up in arms about that. But yeah, it's what I learned though is, I have like standard slides for my first day of classes. That's like I tell them about me, and then we do an icebreaker and get to know them. And like when it's a movie class, I tell them some of my favorite movies, and then I ask one of my questions in the icebreaker is, what's one of your favorite movies? And I did that with games this time, and the icebreaker took roughly twice as long than it ever has, because it turns out young people are way more enthusiastic to talk about video games than movies. And I guess I'd never really thought about it, but it makes sense. I have to imagine, like, young people that age, like 18, 19, 20, probably engage way more with video games and like TV and YouTube and stuff like that than they do movies. Like,
oh yeah.
it's
I mean,
just,
that's like one of my main parlor tricks as like the teacher that plays the video games at school. That's like,
yeah.
I am like by far, for at least, there's obviously some students that, they don't play any games or whatever. But for like that section of students, which is a very large section of the student body, like the fact that I understand what YouTube is, the fact that it's like I know what Among Us is, even if I haven't really played it, I've watched Let's Plays of it because it's a fun game to watch. Like that, like the connection I have to that side of culture, it is like you can leverage that so much more than the fact that everyone's seen Shrek or Little Mermaid or Lion King.
Right.
Like there are a couple of movie touchstones you can do with most of the students, but it's not like I think what it was when we were in high school, where that was like one of the major things that like you would have an expectation that the vast majority of people would have a certain level of familiarity with and like a love for that thing or an enjoyment of that thing. And now, yeah, I think a lot of it has transferred to YouTube and video games and that kind of stuff.
In all of my fucking notes I have here, I learned a word for this. It's subcultural capital that you have as a teacher. The video game stuff and can talk about it. No, I mean, and obviously it's a self-selecting thing for my class because it's students who chose to take a class with the word video games in the title. You're not going to get someone who's never touched a game before in that class. That'd be a little weird. But you had a broad range, and like that is one where like my subcultural capital as like a gamer like really came through. Like they were really excited, like, oh my god, this TA, he actually knows what he's talking about when I say like my favorite game is Persona 3, and I have multiple people going, I love Persona 5, and I'm like, I'm with my people. This is great.
I got an email from a student, this was like 3 or 4 weeks ago, where they were like, Mr. Chapman, I know you play video games. Have you ever played Grand Blue Fantasy Versus? And I was like, unfortunately, I haven't. But like, I'm such a nerd that I know like that. Like, I was like, no, but I have played some of the developers' other games like Dragon Ball Fighters and Guilty Gear. And they're like, oh my god, this person knows what this old person knows what Guilty Gear is. It's like you could feel like how much the student's mind was blown by the fact that I offered up the knowledge of Guilty Gear to them in response to Grand Blue Fantasy Versus.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And my reaction would have been, student, just for sending this email, you get an A in this class. That's so cool.
But then I would know. What I should have done is responded in like with a searching email to see if they knew who the best character in the game is, because it's Catalina, because that's the character voiced by Miyuki Sawashiro, which is one of the only things I know about that game. And that would be what gives you an A in my class.
Yes. You're going to assign them all a paper at some point on, you have to research the works of Miyuki Sawashiro and write about one vocal performance and write an essay about that.
Yeah, and you know, you compare and contrast with Macbeth. I don't know. You can put that in there somewhere because I guess I have to. I don't know.
Miyuki Sawashiro has probably done something Shakespeare related at some point.
I mean, you can take a lot of her characters and compare some of her characters to Lady Macbeth. Like, if they did an anime Macbeth, that's who I would cast as Lady Macbeth for sure.
Sean, what female character in anime wouldn't Miyuki Sawashiro be your number one pick for?
I mean, there isn't one, but, you know, Lady Macbeth would be a good one, though.
All right. I don't know if listeners actually like hearing about our lives this much, but, you know, we don't actually talk this much about just daily life stuff, so maybe this was fun. Any other stuff before we move on? I think we'll do all the video game stuff at the end.
Yeah, I mean, all the other stuff I've been doing is just video game stuff.
Yes. Yeah, I haven't seen many movies or anything. Did you ever watch Wonder Woman 1984?
No, I saw all the reviews and I was like, I'm not going to go out of my way to like subscribe to this service and do all that for a movie that seems like it's not great.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's really a messy movie. I did not hate it in the way a lot of people do. I think it actually has a lot of good stuff in it, but it is not, I would not go out of your way to engage with it, but like if you ever have the chance, it'd be interesting to talk about. And then I just to address this for people who are wondering, I assume we are waiting until it is finished to do the WandaVision episode.
Yeah, I haven't watched any of it yet, kind of because I'm waiting for there to be enough episodes. I only have to subscribe for 1 month of Disney Plus to watch all of them. So,
okay. And I think that's probably, just so you know, how we'll do the Disney Plus MCU shows. I am watching WandaVision week to week because I keep Disney Plus on year round. I use it enough. And I'm enjoying it a lot. And you can follow me on Twitter if you want to see my specific thoughts. But we will do a full episode on it, the same way we do with all the Marvel movies. And it'll be fun. I will say it is very nice to have WandaVision on and just feel like it feels like normal to have Marvel stuff again. That's just one little like piece of normalcy that's like nice to have. Because had been such a part of like the media landscape for so long, and then it was off last year. But yeah, so we will do that probably with that and Falcon and Winter Soldier. I do not think, unless one of these shows rises to like the level of The Mandalorian, which most shows don't, I don't think there would be a reason to do weekly episodes on them. But we will definitely, once they are all wrapped up and everyone's had a chance to watch them, we will cover those the same way we do the Marvel movies.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So Sean, I have a news segment on our outline. And my news segment on the outline just says, do we talk about this fucking GameStop thing? Ugh.
You know, like, it's for people who don't understand what the GameStop thing is. I mean, I don't really either. It's one of those things I think like defies comprehension on multiple levels.
Should I give the 30-second version?
Yeah, go ahead. Just explain to everybody how like money is fake.
Yes. I will say I had been trying to avoid this story for a while because I was like, I don't actually want to put in the time to learn what this is. And then it was so omnipresent, I did put in the time to learn what it is. And the basic long and short of it is that a bunch of Wall Street hedge funds, which hedge funds are groups that basically bring in a bunch of investor capital and then invest in targeted investments. So instead of just putting the money in like a mutual fund that goes up and down with the market, you invest in specific stocks, right? And these hedge funds were doing something called shorting the stocks of GameStop. This is a common but kind of gross Wall Street thing where you are basically betting against a stock doing well. The movie The Big Short gets into this because what the people in that movie and in real life were doing was they were shorting the CBOs and the tranches subprime mortgages, and they were betting against the housing market because they saw that that was going to come before much of the economy did, so they could short it and make lots of money. This is like that, but obviously much lower stakes. So you had a bunch of hedge funds who GameStop is a publicly owned traded company, so it is on the stock market. And because GameStop is flailing and failing as a business, there were a bunch of hedge funds that were shorting GameStop, and they would make money over time if GameStop stock continually went down, is the basics of it. There's this Reddit thread that is a really popular, it's got 2 million people on it. It's a really popular Reddit thread called Wall Street Bets, where they basically play the stock market, not the housing market. They play the stock market. And this has gotten really big over the course of the pandemic through that thread, through apps like Robinhood and stuff, where because there's been no sports, so there's been no sports betting, people haven't been going to casinos. People want to get their fucking monetary rocks off, and so they want to gamble, and everyone realized, oh, the stock market is just gambling. That's all the stock market is. There's no logic to it. It is, if you put your money in a fund that goes up and down with the stock market, you will make money over time. That's what a 401k is, and that's the smart thing to do. But, like, otherwise, it is just fucking gambling. And so people have been gambling with the stock market and having fun and whatever. More power to you, lose your money. But Wall Street Bets saw all these hedge funds shorting GameStop and thought it would be funny or interesting to... They were kind of trying to, like, suck it to the hedge funds. I cannot tell if the thing about GameStop is because it's ironic because they hate GameStop or because they like GameStop. I think it's a little of both, depending on who is doing the investing. But basically, Wall Street Bets did a run on GameStop stock and kept buying and buying, and this triggered an overall run where not just people on that thread, but just investors in general who couldn't tell you a PS4 from a PS5 are buying a bunch of GameStop stock because a bunch of other people are buying GameStop stock. And so this drives the price of GameStop stock way up. It's gone up like 720% in January 2021. It closed this week at like $350 a share or something. And then a bunch of these hedge funds that were shorting GameStop, well, when it goes up and your position is on the short, then you have to pay premiums. And so there was one hedge fund that was worth like $19 billion that was zeroed out and had to take a loan from another hedge fund. So a bunch of them are suffering. But then it really got to a fever pitch when Wall Street and Robinhood, the app, and a bunch of others basically stepped in and were like, well, we do this shit all the time to fuck over normal and poor people, but now normal and poor people are fucking over us, so we're going to put a stop to this. And so, like, Robinhood, the app, halted trading on GameStop. On the New York Stock Exchange, it got stopped a bunch. And yeah, so it's become very... and it's pissed off everyone. It's pissed off, like, literally people on both sides of the aisle in Washington. I think maybe for different reasons. But yeah, it has, if nothing else... I think this week has opened a lot of people's eyes to the fact, and this is a fact, that Wall Street is bullshit and the stock market is a bunch of fucking gobbledygook. And our entire trading system is dumb and should be much more heavily regulated, and stock trade should be taxed, and we need to rein this shit in because this is all fucking stupid. I am not one of those people celebrating like, yay, they stuck it to the hedge funds. Like, yeah, that's nice. The hedge funds will be fucking fine. In the long run, and also like everyone involved is being a fucking idiot because maybe a couple people on Wall Street Bets got rich off of this by selling GameStop stock at a high price, and good for them. But like, it's all dumb. It's so dumb. It's just it shows that if you are pulled into the orbit of the stock market, it's fucking dumb because it is all criminal and gambling.
Yeah, it's that thing where, like, watching the story develop, it just became, like, so exhausting to look at anything connected to it. Because it's, like, it is hard to just stare into the abyss of, like, the fact that everything about modern society is founded on nothing and is just, like, a thin veneer to, like, further the oppression of people who are not privileged by those who have tremendous wealth and power. And it's like, when you look at anything connected to the stock market, that's what it is. And this is like just such a concentrated version of it. And then it just has that little extra like gamer sprinkle of like spice on top of it to just make it feel like extra. Like, I just don't want to pay attention to it. Yeah, it's and it's that like, you know, there's just like flurry of news constantly about like, what is Wall Street doing in response to this? What are the hedge markets doing? What is this fucking app doing? What is Reddit doing? And I think the thing that has been like the most interesting like thing to think about, because I feel like I've not heard anything from this perspective, what the fuck is GameStop think about all this? Like, what? Like, if you're one of the people like working at GameStop, what do you like think when you look at this and just like feel like your like company is just like being thrown in the wind by these random economic forces, and you have like no, it has nothing to do with the company and like what they're doing really. Like, it's so detached from any sort of basis and reality of GameStop
Sean,
that
it
like you're
happened
just
because
sort of sitting
they're
there.
failing.
Yeah.
It's not just it has no basis. They picked this company because it's objectively failing from a market capitalist perspective.
Yeah,
And now it's not for some reason.
Yeah, it is just like bizarre, and I do just love to think about the GameStop people just saying everything like, well, I don't know what's happening. It's like we're just sort of sitting here doing our like fucking buying used games and selling them for like absurd prices, and we're just kind of sitting here, and then apparently our stock is worth like 5 fucking billion% more than it's supposed to be. Like,
it's higher than stock of like Apple and Facebook this week. I mean, it's ridiculous, and I don't know. I have multiple levels of wondering about this with GameStop. Like, obviously, just the normal employees who you go in, and a lot of GameStop employees are really nice, fun people. And I wonder what like they're just thinking is like this is just either a full-time or part-time job or something, but it's just a job, right? Mm-hmm. And then I wonder like, what are like GameStop executives making of this? Like, how does this impact their fucking triage of a business plan that I assume they were on because they are a dying company? Like, does this make GameStop? Does this mean it's going to stick around longer and be more awful? Does it mean they get to be a little less awful? I don't know. Usually with GameStop, I tilt towards they will be awful. But yeah, it's very weird.
Yeah, like it's, I have no idea where it's going to go in the future, but like I feel like it's just going to end with GameStop as like this smoldering wreckage that had like no power over its own demise. Like it was just sort of like flung around willy-nilly by the market and by the people who play the market. Whether it is like the existing Wall Street elite or Reddit people. And it's like I kind of feel bad for GameStop. Like I feel like GameStop deserves its like slow, quiet death that it's earned in like the fact that it's never going to be able to sort of like adopt to the changing like digital element of the market. It's like, let it just sort of fade away peacefully. Don't play with like this with GameStop's heart. It's too cruel.
Can you imagine if this happened to like fucking Radio Shack before the end?
That's exactly what it is like though, right? Yeah, it is like what if, everyone was like Radio Shack's not going to be ever survive. And then people are like, well, if you say it's not going to survive, that means if enough of us just sort of like decide that it's going to survive, its stock is going to go super high. But then, of course, then eventually, like the end game of that is then you're just going to sell all of the stock once it's like at a very high price. And it's like fucking, it's so stupid. God, I hate it. I hate capitalism, Jonathan.
I know. The funniest part of this to me, though, Sean, is that this all revolved around an app called Robinhood that named itself that because if you don't know what Robinhood is or if it's not in your country, it's a stock trading app that the entire idea was that it's supposed to like democratize stock trading because now you can do it on your phone and you don't need like fancy software or anything. You can just do it through this one app like you can, like sports betting has become big on apps and stuff, right? And of course, they chose the name Robinhood because the idea is you're gonna stick it to the stock market and you're gonna make money. You're gonna steal from the rich and you're the poor person and you're gonna make money. And
I do love the idea of like the fundamental misunderstanding of what Robinhood is, where it's like when you try to make the analogy and you say they're gonna steal from the rich. And then you like have to realize, well, the Robin Hood analogy is that then he gives to the poor, and then he keeps all the money for himself. Right. He's not what the Robin Hood story is. He's not a dude who steals from the rich and just hoards the wealth that he accrues.
That's just a normal thief. There's nothing remarkable about that.
Exactly.
But yes, either way, I do love that once something actually happened where rich people were affected by the existence of Robinhood, which was hedge funds going bankrupt because of this, Robinhood just shut it down. They just shut down trading on GameStop. It's like literally like, I mean, I made the joke about Dennis Moore, which is a skit from Monty Python where there's this guy named Dennis Moore who steals from the rich and gives to the poor. And it's very funny and you should go watch that skit. And they should have renamed the app Dennis Moore. But it is like, that is the funniest part to me is that they named themselves Robinhood in just this amazing act of like hubris that eventually would come to bite them in the ass, obviously. Mm-hmm. Obviously, because there is no way to beat the stock market. It's like going into a casino and thinking that you're gonna beat the casino. The house wins. It's not. It's set up to win.
Yeah.
Anyway, This has been the financial edition of the Weekly Stuff podcast. There will be no more installments of this.
We can only pray that
Yeah.
that nothing else that the worlds of video games and the bullshit fucking financial market do not collide in such a spectacular way at any point in the future that we have to actually talk about it.
I mean, once the new White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, was having to field questions about GameStop at the podium in the White House, and I'm just like, they have bigger fish to fry. Why is this a question? Like, Joe Biden and his team, like, there are bigger fucking problems in America right now. This is how stupid a country we are.
Yeah, I want to see, a picture like that, like very famous picture of like Obama in his cabinet when they're like watching this very tense about Osama bin Laden's assassination. It's that, but it's Biden and all of his people, and they're just like watching the GameStop stock prices. There's just like the word GameStop like written on a whiteboard, like underlined 5 times with like 6 exclamation points. That's what we need to be taking care of. GameStop.
And I want one member of the cabinet in that scene also playing like a Nintendo Switch in the back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some like intern.
Yes. All right. I mean, I just wish Joe Biden had been at that meeting, because I'm not one of those Joe Biden has dementia people, but I am someone who takes pleasure in him being 78 years old and some of his like pop culture references being out of touch. And I would have loved a question, what is GameStop? And Joe Biden having to explain that.
Yeah, and he talks about like Pong for 5 minutes.
He just breaks out the corn pop story again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, America. Sean, do you want to talk about some video games?
Let's talk about some goddamn video games, Jonathan.
All right. Well, we've both been playing Hitman 3. We've both been playing Genshin Impact. And you have also been playing Yakuza 6. Do you want to start there and tell us a little bit about Yakuza 6, The Song of Life?
Yes, so Yakuza 6, last time we talked about it on the podcast 2 weeks ago, I was like near the beginning of the game. I think I had just started chapter 4. I'm now like at the very beginning of the last chapter of the game. And and if I didn't feel the compulsion of this, like I really was like, man, I need to play more Hitman 3 before we do the podcast, I would have finished it last night. But I was like, I can't do a podcast on Hitman 3 and have only played 2 levels. I was like, I need to play 1 more level at least before we do the podcast. But yeah, Yakuza 6 is fucking great. Like, it's so good that it's like the main reason why I have not played a lot of Hitman 3 is that all of my video game time has mostly just gone to me playing more and more Yakuza 6. And it's like a really interesting game to play, like on my like journey of playing through all the Yakuza games over the past couple of years, which started with Yakuza 0. And Yakuza 0 is the game they made before Yakuza 6. So in terms of like production order, it's not counting any of the spin-offs. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0, 6. And it's really interesting playing them like that because it becomes very apparent as soon as you get a little bit into Yakuza 6 that like that's the order they went in, because this is the first new Yakuza game I've played like in that kind of production order that now can reference specifically things from 0. Right, that's not a remake of 1 or 2, which is the only other games that can reference things specifically from Yakuza 0. And so it's interesting to me seeing like what feels like the thought process of Nagoshi, the main like sort of creative lead of the series, and his team in making 0 after 5 as a way of sort of scaling back a lot and sort of trying to like recenter the franchise on like its core, because 4 and 5 introducing a bunch of protagonists means it gets very sprawling. And then 0 really kind of refocuses it and like narrows in on who is Kiryu fundamentally as a character, like where does he come from, and then does the same thing with Majima, who is like another big fan favorite character and is a good foil for Kiryu in many ways. And 0 sort of explores that, and then also explores like the 80s bubble economy in Japan, all that kind of stuff. And this, 0 is fucking amazing. And then Yakuza 6, by being the last Kiryu game, like, assuming that they don't ever go back to like making him a protagonist at some point, like that really creates this like interesting parallel where they just made his origin game basically in 0, and then now this is like we're closing out on this character. We're giving him one last game where he is the only main protagonist, which they hadn't done since 3, and in doing that, like, it's very natural that a lot of Yakuza 6 is Kiryu looking back on his life and sort of like reflecting on different elements of it. And so bringing in all this stuff from 0, where there are lots of like side stories that refer to characters or bring characters back from Yakuza 0, but now it's like, I mean, it's like literally like 30 years later. So you're seeing like all these like random people from this old game, or this game set in an older time period, and now they're like all old fuckers like Kiryu, who's like 50 something years old at this point in the game. And like that's such a rewarding experience that makes it feel so worthwhile having like done this and started with 0 and like played through 2.6. So like, yeah, like some of the side stories in the game just are some of my favorite side stories they've done, because there's not as many as there are in a lot of the games because there's more production value. They're all fully voiced in Yakuza 6, which was not the case for any of the other games. So they don't have as much of the side stuff as they did before, but all of it feels like it goes more in depth and kind of like brings a little bit more to the table through the production values. And so there's just a bunch of like dumb side quest stuff from Yakuza 0, like the pocket circuit racer stuff, and there's this whole cult side quest in Yakuza 0 that they bring back those characters into Yakuza 6, and it's very, very satisfying encountering that and being like, oh my god, you're the crazy cult head dude that like Kiryu had like very minimal interactions with back in the 80s, and now they're bringing this character back and sort of telling stories about old men reflecting on the mistakes they've made in their life and trying to come to terms with them. Because that's very much what Yakuza 6 is about, is Kiryu reflecting on his own life, reflecting on some of his mistakes, but then also because Kiryu is a Superman-esque character, he serves as a like symbol of like an ideal that all these other kind of like aged old sort of regretful people can kind of compare themselves to or sort of look up to in different ways. And he reflects on a lot of the characters both in the side stuff and the main story in really interesting ways, and all that really starts coming into play really heavily at the point of the game that I just finished, where at the end of the penultimate chapter of the game there's like a classic style Yakuza like 30-minute long cutscene, where you just goes super deep into the Takeshi Kitano character and his like backstory and get all these flashbacks and all this stuff that's like so good. I think I had heard something or maybe misunderstood something that he was not, that Takeshi Kitano's character would not be in the game that much. And so I was kind of coming and expecting him to be a slightly light character. And that's not true. Like, he is a pretty major character. And it's not a thing of where because he's super famous in Japan that they only got him for like 2 days or something. He is a fully integrated character. His performance is fantastic. The modeling they do on him is so good. And his just fucking like just grim fucking face that he's got. And yeah, like just last night I just finished that whole cutscene with him. So I've been thinking about that character, what they do with him, what they do with the themes. And it just really feels like Yakuza 6 is, I would put it up with Yakuza 0 and Judgment as the best of these games, where it feels like the team has like matured so much over the course of like 10 years, basically going from the original Yakuza 1 through to 5, kind of figuring out exactly how to crack the nut of what these games are and how to tell stories and balance all the different elements. And Yakuza 0, 6, and Judgment all have big sprawling stories the way that all the games do, but there's like this like kernel of like a key thematic idea that guides everything and that like really serves as this thing that ties everything together, that pushes those three games to, and hopefully I suspect this is true of Yakuza 7 as well, pushes them to this like next level of quality where they're just like some of the best games being made, like period. And Yakuza 6 is like sort of the way it's playing with sort of being a father, being a grandfather, because it is very much a grandfather type game of not just dealing with your progeny or your adopted progeny in the case of Kiryu, but dealing with like the step beyond that of them starting their own family, you being a grandfather and having that duty of protection that is now like further backed off, right? Because it's like you have to then allow your child and the people that your child has sort of decided for themselves what the life they're going to make for themselves. You have to let them kind of deal with their problems in some ways and can't be the superhero that rushes in and saves the day all the time. And so like dealing with that, it's like some themes that I've never really seen games deal with because of the age of the main character and stuff like that. Even if Kiryu doesn't look 50, like they play the story of him, he feels that age in a narrative sense. And yeah, it just like really, really is a phenomenal game, and I'm very excited to finish it tonight now that I've played enough Hitman 3 to do the podcast. And it's like now I can go in Finish this game, and then also, like all the side stuff is phenomenal too. It's got some of the best side stuff. The best side stuff in the game, which is some of the best side stuff in any Yakuza game, is this whole bar mini game that is in Onomichi, the new like small town in Hiroshima that a lot of the game takes place in. And it's basically like what if Yakuza did a whole side story chain that was just Cheers, the sitcom, where it's you just come into this bar and there's all these other people in this bar and they're like, oh, who's this weird like newcomer to town? It's like, who this like weird dude from Tokyo thinks he's so fancy. And then you start drinking with them and have this like conversation mini game, and you slowly grow to be friends with all the characters in the bar. And then once you become like friendly enough with them, they tell you about their problems, like, oh, my daughter's has a boyfriend in high school and I don't know how to deal with it. And it's just this very like light, fun, day-to-day like funny problems that all these characters have that are all like in their relationships with each other. And it is probably about like 3 hours worth of side content all put together. And it is like the most Yakuza fucking side stuff in like no other game would be able to do an entire Cheers style mini game with like narrative content associated with it. But I did all that the other day. It was like, holy shit, the fucking game fucking rules.
Well, this is relevant to talk about because the complete Yakuza series with the remastered collection just finished launching on Xbox and PC. So now you can play 0 through 6 and 7. 7 is not on Game Pass, but 0 through 6 are all on Game Pass on PC or Xbox. So if you own either of those, you can just get all of them right now that way. Obviously, they're all on PS4 / PS5. So yeah, if you are wanting to get into Yakuza, this is the time to do it. What are your thoughts now that you've kind of played? I think I've asked you this question before, but you hadn't actually gotten to 6. If you were telling someone like you know, you own an Xbox, you have Game Pass, they're all on there now, would you tell people to do it the way you did, start with 0 and go through 6, or would you do it a little different?
No, absolutely start with 0. Because I think how I've always answered this question is you really want to start with 0. One, because 0 is so good that you will like be hooked on the franchise because of how good 0 is. But then also the remakes of 1 and 2, Kiwami and Kiwami 2, are specifically made with 0 in mind. And so there's lots of stuff, like the side stuff they add into those games. And the whole, like, there's a whole Majima, like, chapter that they created for Kiwami 2 that is like a pseudo sequel to Yakuza 0. All that stuff is made with Yakuza 0 in mind. So it would be weird and kind of awkward to play Kiwami and Kiwami 2 without having played Yakuza 0. Okay. And in the original 1 and 2, there is no way to play them on Xbox or PC. I mean, there's no way to play them on a PS4 either, unless you want to import the HD versions that only came out in Japan on the PS4.
All right. Well, that's good to know. And at some point, I will be getting around to those games. My backlog is very long, but we will be doing Yakuza 7 on the podcast when that is out on PS5, which should be, what, March?
Yeah, it's just a month or so from now.
Oh, I'm excited. Mainly because you showed me that Akio Otsuka singing karaoke thing, and that plus Dragon Quest style combat in a fucking Yakuza game. I am on fucking board. So yeah. I'm excited for this.
I am also very excited for Yakuza 7.
And I'm slightly sad that we will not have any more Sean Talks Yakuza, because it's just been like, because when you think about it, it's not just 0 through 6 is 7 games, plus Judgment is 8. Yakuza 7 is going to be the 9th fucking game in this series you're talking about. The first one I'll be joining you on. Yeah,
that I started playing these in like 2017. So it has definitely been, and I mean, most of them I played over the course of the last year when I did 3 through 5. But yeah, it has been a long journey of me catching up on this franchise. And it just feels very satisfying to like be right on the threshold of like, you know, being able to start the newest game that only came out over here like a couple of months ago.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's talk about Hitman 3. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about Genshin Impact at the end, and that's when people can just stop listening if they don't want to care about Genshin Impact, because we are incessant about it. But yeah, Hitman 3, I think it is important to foreground that Hitman is one of your favorite things in the entire fucking world, right, Sean?
Oh yeah. Hitman 2, like this Hitman World of Assassination trilogy or whatever they're calling it. Yes, some of the best games have been made in the past 10 years, for sure.
And I have always really, really enjoyed them, but never to quite the level of love you have for them, Sean. Hitman 3 has fixed that. Hitman 3, I love passionately this is a fucking masterpiece of a game. I think whatever little pieces didn't quite click for me in the first two games, they click now. And I think some of that is they figured out how to make them click because there are specific flaws that have been ironed over in this and things that are better. But it's also just there's something about the package and like I will admit being on the PS5 where it does not take 7 hours to load and stuff like that just I have been like Sean, I am level 20 on Dubai already and I've done a Silent Assassin suit only run on Dubai and Dartmoor.
Nice.
I don't think I've ever actually finished a Silent Assassin suit only in this series. That's one of the most fun things I've ever fucking done was figuring that out on Dubai, which seemed really daunting to me until I figured out how to do it, and it was so fun. But this game also tells an amazingly good story for Hitman, which was the thing I cared about the absolute least in those first two games, and it is now one of the best things about this game. It is a technical marvel on the PS5. Good God, this is the fucking goods. I adore Hitman 3.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, so I'm only halfway through it, so I've not and I have avoided spoilers as much as possible. Because I just don't even want to see anything about the map about the different maps because so much of this game, of the Hitman games, it is about seeing those maps and exploring them and experiencing it. And it's you so rarely get the opportunity now and with this being the end of this trilogy, who knows when they will do revisit Hitman and figure out what they want to do with it next at some point. But yeah, I kind of have wanted to go in very fresh. So I don't even know really what the last three maps are other than what the picture is on the level select when I was just checked to see how many maps there were total. So I've only played through Dubai. I've played through Dubai a couple of times. I've played through, is it Dartmoor is the mansion?
I think so, yeah.
I've played through that a couple of times, and I've played through Berlin once. I played it this morning when I woke up. I was I need to make sure I play that. I need to play at least the third map on this thing before we do the podcast so I can talk about it.
And Berlin, I will say, is when this game goes from excellent Hitman to oh my fucking God, they are going for something. Because one thing to know about Hitman 3 is that, it really wants to kind of challenge some of your perceptions about the series. It has, it basically starts with Dubai, that is a very standard, Hitman 1 and 2 map. Not, and I don't mean standard in a bad way. It's one of the best versions of that in the whole series, but it is this is kind of what you expect. And then Dartmoor, you already know Sean has some really crazy stuff going on. And then Dubai... or not Dubai, Berlin, they start throwing stuff out the window. Berlin is crazy, and that keeps up. They really, I'm not going to spoil the last three maps for you, Sean, but it is not just more of what you played in Hitman 1 and 2. And that is something I really like, because I liked Hitman 2, but I liked Hitman 2 a lot less than Hitman 1, and I think part of it was that, and we've talked about it a lot, Hitman 1 had this episodic release schedule where it wasn't a game, it was a season of a game. It was a series of these big standalone maps that you got, and you would digest this map in full before moving on to the next one, and that's how that game was meant to be played. It's how it came out, all of that stuff. Hitman 2 was very clearly designed to do that, and then because Square Enix dropped them and they got the WB contract, and I think they had a slightly lower budget, which you can see in the cutscenes in that game, Hitman 2 comes out all at once, but it's got the same kind of structure, and I think Hitman 2 felt a little shapeless to me because of that, in that it was basically just more levels from Hitman 1, but now it's all in one package, and it didn't quite make as much sense. Hitman 3, they have gone back to the drawing board and said, okay, we're making this as one game. How do we make this feel like a unified game and not 6 separate standalone levels? While maintaining what made it so good in Hitman 1 and 2, and I think they thread that needle absolutely perfectly. Part of that is that they tell a real fucking story this time, and it is really good and engrossing and plays into the levels much more than in the other games. But part of that is just I think the way the levels are diversified, the way they play off of one another, it is as just one video game package and not kind of an episodic release. It feels much more solid to me. To the point where I realized while playing through Dubai, or not, God, I keep messing these up, through Berlin, that, okay, because I had been playing it, I did Dubai, I played Dubai a bunch, I did Dartmoor a bunch, and then when I hit Berlin, I realized, okay, this game doesn't want me to do that the same way I did in Hitman 1 and 2. I really think the game wants you to kind of sit down and play the whole campaign and then go back in and start doing them, because they're linked together in a very different way. And like, I would recommend for you, Sean, like, just sit with the game and like play through to the end, because there's a real propulsion to it. And there's like a differentiation between the first time you play a level and when you go back in that's very different than in the other games. And it just makes for a game that is like so rock solid tight. And I loved the episodic structure they used for Hitman 1, but if you're not doing that, I think it demands a slightly different design. And they figured that out with Hitman 3 to a really invigorating degree. It is so good.
Yeah, because I'll say, like, as obviously I've not done with the game, like, I'm not fully settled on how I feel about that, like, because it's going to take time for me to go through and, like, properly play through the maps, and because for me, a lot of what Hitman is that, like, it's like on the other side of that level of mastery where you're doing, like, the master difficulty silent assassin suit only, like, that kind of stuff, and, like, really sort of doing everything the map offers. That I'm curious to see if that the sort of what based on Dartmoor in Berlin, like, is like, I don't mean this in a negative sense, but I can't think of another word to use, like a gimmick design, right? That there's a core gimmick to the level. In Dartmoor, it's a murder mystery. In Berlin, it's that you don't have your set standard targets. You have a pool of 10 targets you have to eliminate 5 of and investigate to find out where at least 5 of the targets are to assassinate. And so I'm curious to see how that affects things like escalation contracts and that stuff, where there's not at least like immediately, you don't have the thing that the Hitman 2 maps had a lot of and the Hitman 1 maps had a little bit less of, which is like all the different mission stories that really sort of move things around the map and sort of serve as pivot points in the like clockwork design of the maps, where you can force targets to go to certain places and to do certain things to trigger different kind of events. Because just sort of like scrolling through, like, there's no more than 3 mission stories on any of the maps, and it feels I'm curious to see, going through like many times doing all the different challenges and everything, if that design will work for me in like the long term, in the way that the like traditional Hitman design in 1 and 2 rewarded this degree of like intensive replaying to like truly master every facet of what the game was offering you. Which again, like, I have no idea if it does or does not, but it presents like an interesting twist on that, where it feels like there is something like distinctly different feeling about the first time you play a map on any of the Hitman 3 ones I've played so far compared to Hitman 1 and Hitman 2, where your first playthrough doesn't really feel special other than that you don't know the map yet.
So, yeah, I'm trying to say this without spoiling anything for you, Sean. I wouldn't worry about that too much.
Okay.
Especially with the next 2 maps you have coming up, which I feel like I barely scraped the surface of playing through once. And I have done Dubai to level 20. I'm almost level 20 on Dartmoor, so like I've done these a lot. And I think, here's what I think about it, is I think that other side of it is there, and I haven't played them. Again, I've only done the first 2 super in-depth so far, but I have done Berlin a couple of times, and Berlin actually becomes fairly different on multiple playthroughs.
Yeah, that's the one I'm really excited about going back through. I think the main place where that criticism comes from is mostly Dartmoor, which I think the first time I played through that map, I was like, man, this is fucking awesome. And then on subsequent playthroughs, I haven't found it to be as rewarding as, like, it has felt like, oh, I kind of like did the gimmick, and the rest of it doesn't like kind of live up to how interesting that core gimmick is when you're doing like the other ways to sort of navigate that map, if that makes sense.
I think that's probably true about Dartmoor. Like that's a pretty easy one to do a silent assassin suit only run on. Like I could actually make the guide for this right now, because I figured out a pretty foolproof way to do it. But there are a lot of fun nooks and crannies there, and I think Dubai and the other ones are very rewarding. But one thing I will say that it fixes for me, Sean, is that it has that second side of it, like the replays I find really fun in this game, like I always have. But one thing in Hitman 1 and 2 is, I don't know how to word this, I never really liked playing a level for the first time in Hitman 1 or 2. There's something about like just seeing the level for the first time and the mission stories being very on rails, and there's a certain like the Hitman games take a lot of patience because things move very, very, very slowly. There was I almost recorded this and posted it. There's a part in one of the levels where you're following someone walking downstairs, and like literally you cannot move Agent 47 as slowly as this person walks. It is impossible to manipulate the DualSense to make Agent 47 move as slowly as this person, but you also have to stay behind them. And it's like there's something about that where like one thing I would love to see added to Hitman is like a fast forward feature where I could just like move the clock and like see that. That would be really great if like when you've mastered a level, if they gave that to you or something. But like, so some of that patience and the on rails stuff in the other games I would find kind of tedious, and I just wanted to get to me goofing off in the level and like trying, and like the chemistry set aspect of it, of like I want to see what I can make blow up, literally and figuratively. And you know I kind of play these games like a bull in a fucking china shop. But I find the first playthroughs of levels in Hitman 3 utterly fucking engrossing. Part of that is due to the narrative content they've kind of built in, where I didn't really care that the story stuff was bad and dumb in the first two games because it's not what the game is about. But I think IO wanted the game to be about that. Like, there's a certain level of, like, they wanted to tell you a story. They were just, especially in Hitman 2, I think because of, like, budget cuts or whatever, shockingly inept at it. And in Hitman 3, it's really engrossing, and you go into these levels feeling like a super spy, and there's so much atmosphere, and, like, there's a push to it. But then I also think, like, the mission stories they have designed, they are fewer in number. I find them quite a bit more compelling to go through, and I don't know if I can point to like a specific there without getting into spoilers, because especially this is true in the second half. But like, there's just something about like the first time in these levels that is so full of mystery, and the mission stories are so interesting in what they will reveal to you, and feel so specific. And then when you go back in, it doesn't feel like you're doing that thing again. You're in kind of a slightly different version of the map that is like for the chemistry set aspect of it, that becomes really fun. So it kind of gets a best of both worlds to me, where I felt like I had to suffer through the first couple levels in Hitman 1 and 2 to like get enough mastery that I had the fun stuff to go in and just experiment. And in this, in Hitman 3, I enjoy every stage of it so much in a way I didn't in the first two. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I broadly agree. I'm like, in the thing, I'm really excited to play through Berlin multiple times, because that was where it felt more like I could see the potential of different playthroughs, especially because, I mean, on the one playthrough through that map, you only can kill a maximum of half of the potential targets. So like that's very exciting to me, of being like, there are targets that exist in that map that I don't even know where they are or like what the fuck they were doing. And yeah, there is definitely a like smoother experience on that first playthrough, because there is like a clearer design intent for like a main playthrough through the map, right? Compared to something like Miami in Hitman 2, that is like this huge map and is incredibly impressive. But it is like the first time you approach it, you have absolutely no idea what to do, because it's like, here is this incredibly elaborate map that's got so much going on. There are like three very distinct sections of the map that can kind of influence each other in slightly different ways. And that's kind of how the mission story stuff was designed in Hitman 1, and they increased this in Hitman 2, is that about half of the mission stories in those games weren't really direct assassination opportunities. They were more, if you fulfill this thing, it changes something about the way that like the AI is going to navigate the map, and that can lead to different kinds of assassination opportunities. But they weren't all, in what so far I've played with Hitman 3, all of them have been, here is a way to get you like a very like bespoke murder. And that was, and in terms of that is about the same number as what the old maps would have. They would have about 3. And then the other ones were smaller ones that did slightly different stuff. So, like, I'm curious about playing through Berlin again, which has no mission stories, because I don't even know how it would. Like, it doesn't even make sense with, like, the way the design of the map is so fundamentally different. That, to me, feels like a really exciting approach, where they're sort of discarding that idea entirely and just saying, hey, like, we're making what is almost like a super version of what fans could do on their own in Hitman 1 and Hitman 2, which is create their own assassinations and go through and mark different people and sort of like make them targets in the map and kind of bury the targets in the map. In Berlin, it is, we have done this for you with 10 distinct targets, and you have to go figure out where they are and how to take care of them. And there's no mission story, there's no guiding hand in that way, because all the assassinations feel very unique, or at least like when I played through it.
Yeah. One way I would phrase all this is that with Hitman 1 and Hitman 2, I would heavily recommend those games to people because they're fantastic games. But if I were then telling them how to play it, I would never, ever recommend sit through and play all 6 levels in a row. Like, that would be a terrible way to experience those games. With Hitman 3, I would say, clear out, 2 nights and just play the 6 levels in a row and, do it in depth for, 1 time on each of them, and you will be blown away, and then you will be super excited to go back into all of them. And that's what I mean by the adjustment from an episodic model to this is a game. This is a game that's coming out all at once. It's $60. Here you go. And I feel like they really nailed that. And for me, just yeah, there probably are fewer of those other kinds of mission stories you're saying, but I feel like figuring out that balance of keeping what is special about Hitman 1 and 2, but also kind of tightening those screws a little bit so that it feels more like what you would expect buying just a single $60 game. And having a really satisfying experience that way. It's just super impressive to me. It's one of those things where this is not as radical a makeover as a Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 2, but it has that sense of intelligence of what is great about our game and what could be better in this specific format. And you can just feel the cogs at work in the minds of the developers playing it, and I love that. It's a really smart game, and I will just say, Sean, some of the best stuff is yet to come. The 4th map, the next one you have to do, is unfucking believable. I'll just say it took me over an hour for my first run through, and I didn't even notice. I love it. It's so engrossing, and I have not gone back into it yet, but I am so excited to because I barely skimmed along the surface of that one. I feel like.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what the other maps do. One element of the package we haven't talked about, which is it was a thing I thought about the other day when I was looking at the game, is this is maybe the most complicated fucking game launch in the history of video game launches. What IO did, where if you think about one, this is an indie game. Full stop. This game is developed and published by IO Interactive, which is they didn't, they lost their original publisher, Square Enix, after all that shit happened after Hitman 1, but WB published Hitman 2. This game is self-published, so one, that's already fucking crazy. It is a cross-generation launch that allows you to bring over stuff from the PS4 to PS5 and the 1 to the series. This game launches, Jonathan, I believe it launched day and date on 10 different platforms. It launched on the Xbox One, the Xbox One X, the Xbox Series S, the Xbox Series X, the PS4, the PS4 Pro, the PS5, the PC, Stadia, which is its own distinct platform because it's Linux-based, and there is a fucking cloud version you can play on the fucking Nintendo Switch. So it's launched on 10 different platforms, day and date, and also it then allows you to take all the content and your progress from Hitman 1 and Hitman 2, including the DLC to Hitman 2, which when they did that for Hitman 2, when they launched Hitman 2, you could bring the Hitman 1 content forward, you couldn't bring any of your progression forward. So you had to redo all the Hitman 1 stuff in Hitman 2 if you wanted to get those unlocks. And now, I know that, I didn't do it on launch day because I was so fucking busy I couldn't play the game. So I know that on the day, the servers were fucked. But when I did it, the next day, I didn't have any problems uploading all my saves and all that shit. And so when I did that and I just loaded up the game, I had all of my stuff, my legacy stuff from Hitman 2, including I had gone through and replayed all of Hitman 1 and gotten all those unlocks. So it's I had fucking Santa 47 and my fucking outstanding distinction coins and my winter suit I got from Hitman 1, which is one of the few things that carried over through your account because you had to do Silent Assassin elusive targets 15 times or something. It was super hard to unlock. It's all that shit carried forward, and you have all 6 levels for Hitman 1. You've got a bunch of the escalation contracts, not all of them because it's only the ones that carried through to Hitman 2. All the rejiggered versions they did for the Game of the Year version, all 6 of the Hitman 2 maps, the 2 DLC maps for Hitman 2, all the escalation contracts for Hitman 2, and then all the Hitman 3 stuff on top of it. And again, that's stuff that carries over from a PS4, from an old gen version to a next gen version. That is fucking crazy. There's no other video game that has ever allowed something like that degree of carryover of progress and content, as much as we've always wanted things being able to carry over old maps from multiplayer and stuff like that in different Call of Duties, or your character progress in Mass Effect and stuff like that. All that shit, whenever they try to do it, is always here's this very pared back version that takes a couple of your choices or whatever. This is like, you just have all of Hitman 1 and Hitman 2 just in this one game with all the improvements on the PS5. This is fucking crazy.
You're not even saying the most impressive part, Sean. The most impressive part is on PS5. The file size of Hitman 3 is less than half the size of Hitman 2 with Hitman 1 installed. And this is all of that Hitman 1 and Hitman 2 stuff, plus the entire Hitman 3. It's 59 gigabytes. It was somewhere in the vicinity of 120 to 130 gigabytes on PS4 for Hitman 2. I know because I had it on my PS5. And when I downloaded Hitman 3, I'm like, oh, it must have just downloaded Hitman 3. I'll have to download the 1 and 2 stuff. Nope. It's just one 59 gigabyte file is all of the entire trilogy with fully, like, this should be understood as fully remastered versions of Hitman 1 and 2. They are in full technical parity with Hitman 3, all in one package for 60 gigabytes, which is really nice for our tiny new hard drives we've got on these new fucking systems. It's amazing. It is an amazing technical accomplishment. I have my rants I can make about the always online aspect of the game because I still think it's fucking stupid, but holy crap, I can't believe everything you just said, plus the file size. It is amazing, and it is so cool to just have the whole Hitman trilogy in one launcher, one unified game, one pretty small download by modern standards. They're all at 60 FPS, they're all at 4K, they've got the adaptive triggers and DualSense, all of that stuff. It is a more generous package than anything anyone else has given you for a next-gen upgrade.
Yeah, it's fucking mind-blowing. I think actually like the most impressive part of all of it we still haven't said, which is also a huge part of this game was developed during a fucking global pandemic. It's like, how the fuck did they do this? Like, it is mind-blowing to me. Like, you just look at like the conditions under which they made this game and like what they offer, and it's the kind of thing where, you know, having played games for a long time now, you just get very used to stuff like, oh, like, that stuff doesn't carry over, that doesn't work, like that breaks. And like, again, including Hitman 2, it got all the content, but it couldn't get all the progress. And it's like the fact that all of that shit carries over to this game. And so, you know, the night or like the second or third day after I bought the game, when I had time to like sit down and play it, I didn't have a big enough chunk that I wanted to actually start on Hitman 3 stuff. I was like, I just want to load it up and run around. And so I just like loaded up some of the old maps and ran around and felt like, oh my God, the loading is so fast. Holy shit. Like, look how nice the carpet looks on Paris. The carpet looks very good on Paris. I don't know what they did to that texture, but it is very luscious.
I definitely ran around Paris because Paris has those giant crowds, and seeing that in just a solid 60 FPS is amazing.
Yeah, so yeah, just like being able to run around in that old content as Santa 47, very, very satisfying. It is like the promise of what this game was with Hitman 1 feels like, even though they couldn't carry through the episodic release thing, which is, I think, still going to be like the most fun. I don't know if there's ever going to be a way like for Hitman to be better than that for me personally, because that was like so perfect the way that episodic stuff worked. But to be able to carry at least some of that dream forward of having this one contiguous product that all that content goes forward and all of your unlocks and all that stuff continues to move through with you into like the future content. Like the fact that they've been able to like stand by that element of it at the very least is really cool.
It's so cool. It's a real testament to what they've pulled off with this trilogy, and like in the midst of incredible turmoil for this developer, because most stories like this where your first game doesn't sell very well and you get dropped by a publisher as big as Square Enix does not end with you making Hitman 3.
Yeah.
And making a Hitman 3 this good and this comprehensive and with a better, like, there are technical difficulties with some of the online stuff and whatnot, but a better launch than you had under Square Enix, and more hype and more critical reception, like,
and better sales. Like, we don't have the full numbers yet, but it is sold, as far as we can tell, like better than any of these other games have at launch.
And it's a real next-gen showcase, too. Like, it is not as impressive as something like Demon's Souls or Miles Morales, and it is clearly cross-gen, but it runs really well on the PS5. You get those load times. You get good use of the DualSense, I think. I like how they use the adaptive triggers, particularly firing like an automatic weapon, and you just feel like it gives you the feedback of like bump, 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 bump on your finger as you're firing the trigger. Oh man, I love those stupid triggers, Sean.
I mean, specifically with Hitman, I don't know if you've used any of these guns in Hitman 3, Jonathan, but there have been since Hitman 1, there's been a type of gun. There's a couple of pistols that have this and a couple of snipers that have this, that have a like half trigger pull state where for the pistols, it increases the accuracy of the pistol. If you pull down the right trigger like halfway through, it would kind of narrow the crosshairs. And then a couple of the snipers that have this trait, it like slightly slows down time a little bit. And that has always been super finicky. And that was like one of the first things I did on those old maps when I realized, oh shit, they're using adaptive trigger stuff. I wonder how that works with these guns that I always felt like never quite worked properly. And with the adaptive triggers, it's just this like very clear, smooth action where you pull in the trigger halfway and then it locks, and then you get the like increased accuracy or the slight slowdown with the gun. And then you have like that harsh lock that then you pull all the way through to actually fire the gun. Like it is a very satisfying use that has like gameplay implications, that feels like a gameplay concept they came up with Hitman 1, and there wasn't a great control solution for it, and that now that like has gone through, and those guns from that game now on a controller they couldn't have possibly imagined would exist in 2021, like has like executed on like the gameplay conceit of what those guns do. Like, that's fucking wild.
The promise of the GameCube controller is finally realized.
Yes. Yeah, there was some IO developer who's just like, God damn it, the half pull on those GameCube controllers were so good. I don't even care if these controllers can't do it. I'm going to make a gun that would be really good on those triggers.
But no, I haven't tried one of those guns in Hitman 3. But like, I'll say one thing is, I never really went back and did all my unlocks again in Hitman 2 on Hitman 1 stuff, because I was playing the Hitman 2 stuff and it was a lot of content. Now I want to do that. I really feel incentivized to go back and get all my Hitman 1 stuff, finish what I haven't finished on Hitman 2, keep playing Hitman 3. Like, I am so happy that I have this game digitally sitting on my PS5 hard drive, and like it is fast and it works, and I will just be able to like on any rainy day go in and just play some Hitman, and it's all there in one place, better than ever. That is such a cool thing. That is, I paid about $70 for this game with tax, because I got the like special edition that was like $3 more on PS Plus, and like I could have paid a full $100 and felt like I got my money's worth. This is such a good package. And yeah, Hitman did not make my top 10 lists for the first two games. I would be fucking flabbergasted if this one didn't for me this year. This sets a really high bar for 2021. This is a great video game.
Yeah, it is. It is like, as a full package, it is amazing. And yeah, like the new levels, particularly Berlin, I think like they are doing something really interesting, and I think it is very smart of them to decide to go for a different kind of approach and to change up the formula more, because we do have, and especially if people never played the DLC maps for Hitman 2, the bank and the resort, those are two incredible levels. And so if people have not played those, and you want like what are two of the best like classic style Hitman maps that have all the mission stories and that kind of stuff, like those from Hitman 2 are also phenomenal. So yeah, I think like having all of that legacy content there, and then them being able to like leverage that for, let's do something more experimental, let's play with the formula, let's do our fucking crazy murder mystery mansion, and let's do our like John Wick assassin map. It's very good shit.
How do you feel about IO going off to make a James Bond game after this?
I think it is smart for them to say to walk away from Hitman for a little bit, because I think like, I don't know, especially seeing that like this is the one where they're like really tweaking the formulas and like not just putting out, here's a bunch of more that version, like that kind of Hitman map. Yeah. They've said that this is the end of the trilogy. So I like imagine that means that they're going to let it rest for a little bit, come back and reapproach it in the future. So I think that is smart for them to give Hitman a break, to kind of give it time to be reinvigorated. And as someone who's like, I enjoy James Bond, I'm not a huge James Bond dude, I think it is a good choice of developer. I think there's some really cool shit that they could do with that property. I don't know.
Yeah,
you're a James Bond man. How do you feel?
Well, I'm a little torn. Honestly, it's because there is no better developer on Earth than IO for a James Bond game. Like, there's just factually, empirically, there is no one better who could do this based on the Hitman games. Like, they will make a great James Bond game. I have zero doubt about that. I also kind of feel like they're maybe too good for it. There's some part of me that just looks at Hitman 3 and is like, God damn it, the reward for this should not be you get to go make a licensed game. There's just some part of me that kind of feels like that. Like, I don't know. It's not the same way, but it's sort of like Rocksteady going from Batman to not that they created Batman to Suicide Squad. It's just like, well, God damn it, let them do something new. But the thing about James Bond that is nice is that it is such a broad, open canvas. You can kind of do anything vaguely high-class spy stuff. And apparently they're going to have like a new James Bond in it. It's not going to be like a movie character. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of potential there. The other part of me thinks, man, they should be... What I really want is a John Wick game that IO makes. Although, maybe we don't need that because, I mean, honestly, just like give us a Keanu Reeves like model in Hitman 3 as DLC, and that is a John Wick game, basically. But yeah, I think it's cool. And I guess one thing is, it's a pretty good way for IO to make a shit ton of money and like secure their future without kind of totally selling out, because it is something that they're going to be really good at and that they seem to have some creative freedom on. But yeah, there's some part of like the jumping from Hitman to a licensed game that feels a little bit like, God damn it, they should get more than this. But it is, if you were going to give any license to IO, 007 is probably the one you'd do, right?
Yeah, and I think there's like a potential for them to be able to like use the James Bond license, which is, as you said, like it's so broad and open. Like James Bond has meant so many different things over the years, that like you can, especially if they're being given license to make their own unique version of the character and all of that, it can really be whatever you want as long as it's a spy game. But like historically, James Bond games have not really been spy games. They've been first-person shooters because people liked GoldenEye. So there have been, I know that there were a couple of those PS2 James Bond games that people like that were a little bit more like action-adventure spy games. But I think there's a cool idea there with IO of being able to make a proper spy game, which is not a like genre that I feel like has translated to video games super well over the years. Like people have tried it, but I don't think people have really cracked the formula much. In Hitman basically is a spy game, only you're assassinating people, right? Like it has that same, you're investigating, you're like figuring out what's going on, sort of playing with the scenario behind the scenes, unseen, and that stuff that like I think there's a potential for them to take some of the Hitman ideas and leverage it into something that is more properly in the spy genre that could be very cool.
Yeah, I am on board with whatever this developer wants to do for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And I just hope the 007 game turns out well and just buys them even more of a future, you know? Because that's one of the best things you get out of licensed games is a developer just getting legs to run on. And yeah, I think giving Hitman a little bit of a rest is fine because... I mean, you can't do much better than Hitman 3. And I will be happy to meet Agent 47 again one day when he wants to come back and put on some new disguises.
Yes, I do love that they have, like... I feel like they're even more, like, sort of brazen with the... Here's a man who has just talked to this lady. He walks away, you murder him and put on his clothes, and the lady just thinks that you're him, even though, like, you look nothing like him. I feel like in Hitman 1, they at least try to do stuff like Helmut Kruger and stuff like that, where at least the dude looks enough like Agent 47 that you could kind of see it. At least he's bald. Or you'd put on a wig, which some of the character disguises Hitman 1 did. Hitman 3, they're just like, nah, fuck it. Like, everyone gets it. So it's fine if you just, like, murder this dude who looks nothing like Agent 47 and walk up to the person he was talking to literally 2 minutes ago. They're like, oh, hey, so you changed your mind? Here, come on in. I'll let you meet the Sheik or whatever.
I know exactly what you're talking about. This is in Dubai, and it is. I had the exact same thought. It is so funny. Now I just want to stop recording and go play more Hitman.
Me too. Again, I've literally finished playing through the Berlin map about 30 minutes before we started recording. So think about how much I want to go and play more Hitman right now.
Oh, it's such a good game. Highly recommended. 2021 off to a good start in video games. Also, Sean. Genshin Impact will not let me go. This game is so good, Sean.
It is so unbelievably good. Yeah.
What the fuck? This is like, okay, you can't call a game that has made as much money as Genshin Impact a sleeper hit, but why are more people not talking about it? This is a fucking masterpiece of an online game. Like, it is ludicrously good. If I were to, I've been thinking about this because I did not play this game in time for our top 10 list, Sean. But like, let me do my quick revision of my top 10 list from last year. My number 10 and 9 were Gears Tactics and Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. Take those both off because one of them was partially cheating. And I'm gonna. My new number 10 is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, because I think that should have been on there, and whatever. I'm going to replace it. So that one's on there. And then bump everything up a spot, and I'm going to put Genshin Impact in at number 3. I will still have Ori and Hades above it, just trying to fight recency bias here a little bit. But Genshin Impact was one of the top games of 2020. There's no fucking doubt. Like, when I compare this to other, like, live service games I've played, there is a, like, unity of game design and purpose to Genshin Impact where everything you do feels like it contributes to something else in a sort of like meaningful, fun way, and all the activities are just generally pretty fun in a way that, like, if you plopped me into Destiny 2 right now, and I have played a lot of Destiny 2 and told me to try to figure out how all the systems interact, I would give up. Like, if you put a gun to my head and said, figure out how, like, this thing relates to this thing, which relates to this thing, I would say, just shoot me. I'm not going to figure that out. Like, it is too sprawling, and it is too confusing, and I'm going to go, like, play a strike, but, like, I can't figure all this shit out, especially because, like, also in Destiny 2, half the game is just fucking unavailable to you if you don't have a raid group. Like, there's something about how Genshin Impact just, it pulls you in, and it is addictive, but in this, like, really fun and rewarding way. And it's got this spine of, like, a great story and cutscenes and all this stuff. I've played it, except for the day I was on the road, and I was in Kearney, Nebraska, because my tire blew. I have played Genshin Impact every day since I started playing it, Sean.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
When I got home to Iowa Sunday night and I was tired from my drive, I plugged in my PS5 and launched it so I could get my fucking Primo Gems and check what was going on. And it is relaxing. It is the perfect podcast game. But also, like, if you want to put on a nice pair of headphones and just spend time engaging in the story, it is wholly engrossing on that level. Is amazing combat system, all this stuff, and like the gotcha element of it. You know, it's something that you almost barely think about. Like, it's there, and I've spent, I think, about $20 on the game total. Because I did, out of curiosity, I bought the Battle Pass. So I was like, how does this work? And
Battle
you don't
Pass
need to buy the
doesn't
Battle
seem
Pass.
good.
Don't do that.
Yeah,
Don't do that.
I have not bought the Battle Pass because it just never seemed worth it.
It's not worth it. So I will not do that again. But I also, do I feel bad about giving $20 to this game I've spent probably 60 hours on so far? No, I don't. Not yet. So yeah, like, my only complaint is I have not unlocked a new character since we last spoke, Sean, and I got Diluc and Water Boy. God, what's his name? Sean Liu or something.
I don't have him, so I don't know.
Okay.
He's dead to me.
Yeah, water book boy. But anyway, I have gone through a lot of bad draws where I've just gotten either repeat characters or bad weapons. So I've been on a little bit of a dry spell there, and you know what? Still having fun with the game.
Yeah, I mean, well, I was on a dry spell for a very long time, and then I got like 5 characters in a row, and I have like 3 or 4 or 5-star characters. I haven't played Genshin Impact actively probably since around the time we did the last podcast. Like, I mess around with the event they're doing with like all the like new versions of the elemental bosses, but like I've been mostly just like kind of logging in, messing around a little bit, doing some of the repeatable bosses to get materials so I can ascend my characters, because I'm at adventure rank 45, and all my main party is at level 80, and I can't ascend them until I get adventure rank to level 50. So I'm trying to get all the like materials I need to, so that way once it ticks over to 50, then I can just ascend all my characters in one big go and have everybody start leveling up to 90, which I think is the level cap currently. It's either there might be another jump to 100. I'm not sure, but
I have a level 70 party, and I'm at adventure rank 36. And honestly, my biggest difficulty with the game right now, Sean, is pulling myself away from sort of the daily grind stuff to finish all the story. I am still not done with the Liyue quest line. And I need to just, like, because, like, for the last couple weeks I've been playing Genshin Impact against other stuff like Hitman.
Yeah.
I need to, like, make the time to, like, sit down one night and just do all the Liyue stuff. But, like, because right now, the way Genshin Impact, it just fits into my life so well, where if I'm having a busy day and then a podcast comes out I want to listen to, it's just the perfect thing to sit down and do the dailies and run around and fight a couple of repeatable bosses and go find some chests and just enjoy the beautiful world and listen to podcasts, and it's very relaxing. And then move on. And usually I spend more time than I intend to because it's so addicting. But I did do this morning. I wound up playing one of the character stories you unlock by doing the dailies. Mm-hmm. It was the one for Klee, I think is her name.
Yes, Clay.
Little fire girl. Yeah, I did her, and then I've unlocked the ones for Wind Boy.
Venti.
What's his name? Venti. Yeah, Venti, who I really want, but I don't have yet. Venti, and I got the one for Jean. And I'm going to play those at some point. But then I still have to finish, like I said, the Liyue stuff, which I'm not that far into the Liyue questline at all, but it's really cool because Liyue is one of the coolest areas in a video game ever. I've completely finished all the stuff on the Ice Mountain, the Storm Terror Mountain. I loved all of that. It's a fucking feast of a game. I adore it.
Yeah, it's very fun hearing this because like your experience with it is like exactly what my experience was, right? Like it's a similar like because what you're doing right now, that is exactly what I was doing around the time I was at Adventure Rank, where it was like I was busy with other stuff, so I didn't want to sit down and spend like a couple of hours doing the main story stuff, but I would hit the daily stuff every day and like chip away at like some of that kind of stuff around the edges, and it is that thing about the game where I think. Coming from this very different lineage in terms of design philosophy from mobile games gives it this very different perspective on design than like service games that just come up through traditional AAA development. And it's been just so fascinating, I think, seeing people like myself and you, Jonathan, and other people online like starting to sort of like see that and like get what that's going for and like what it allows you to do with a game and how much sort of overall better suited it is philosophically towards what a service game is trying to be, while a lot of like the mainstream game media like has not really caught up to it, because it was something like you said, it feels like a sleeper hit from that perspective because the mainstream game media just sort of kind of like looked at it as a curiosity around its launch and never really picked it up again. Meanwhile, it's like one of the most like financially successful games that released last year because it's making a shit ton of money, both like in the West, but then also like it's hugely successful in China and Japan. And it's like just really interesting to see that where like it feels like Genshin Impact has gone most of the way to basically be a AAA game made with a mobile like developer kind of like philosophy, but still is not quite enough to crack the kind of like bias that I think a lot of the mainstream game media has with regards to mobile and gacha games, which are more played than like games typically are on consoles, and yet like get almost no coverage. Like I've never heard on a podcast that I listen to or articles on Kotaku or Polygon about fucking Dragon Ball Legends or Fate Grand Order, even though I play those games a lot. Lots of people play those games a lot, but they just kind of like go unseen by that market, in that kind of like media arm. And it's interesting seeing Genshin Impact not quite break through that, even though it feels like it fucking should.
Well, it should, because what Genshin Impact, the magic of it is it has taken like the best of that mobile design philosophy and married it to something that has the depth and like size and level of engagement as a big AAA console title. Like this feels totally at home on the PS5. It is a beautiful game. It is one of the best open worlds I've ever played. It is, I mean, just the affinity with Breath of the Wild, I don't even think about that much anymore, but just like if Breath of the Wild could get the amount of praise it got, this is the game that like has like fed off that design philosophy more than anything else so far. And I think a lot of games are going to be influenced by what Genshin added to that formula, and like it's going to be an important game moving forward. You can just tell, and it should be talked about more. And I think the thing about the mobile design that is where you're talking about, I think is so right, is like the problem to me with something like Destiny 2 is that if you're going to actually engage with Destiny 2, it wants it to be the only thing you spend your time doing.
Yeah.
It is so much too demanding of you. And Genshin Impact has, like, it gets a little grindy. I'm at level 70. I have to fight the fucking, like, hypostasis things a lot. But I don't know. I don't have to go do a fucking raid and make a team. Like, you know, I can just kind of relax and do it. There's just a difference to it. And, like, if that's what you're into with Destiny, that's great. But I think it is kind of a self-selecting audience at a certain point, and I don't know how that game can really grow. And as much as I like Destiny, I don't know when I will fit that back into my life because it is just so demanding on you. And Genshin Impact, One, like I said, it would be worth doing a podcast just breaking down the systems of this game and how they all interact, because it is so tightly designed. Not over designed, but just tightly designed, where like I feel like if I gave it up for a couple months, I would remember how to do everything. It is very accessible on that level, and rewarding. But then also, like, I mean, it tells story better than Destiny ever has, even at its best. So, like, and it's just got this charming world to be in, and I still, oh my god, I love the dialogue options in this game more than fucking anything, because they are so fun, and your relationship with Paimon and everything. Like I said, it's just a feast. It's a feast of a game, and you have no excuse not to give it a try, because it's free. I wish it were on more platforms. I wish they would get it on stuff like Xbox and stuff, so I could recommend it to more people. But people probably own a PS4, which is not the best way to play it, because the PS5 at least has the better frame rate. But if you've got a decent PC, I assume that can run it. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great game. And like, in case in point with that Destiny 2 stuff, like, I bought all the DLC for Destiny 2, and I have still not finished it. Like, it's on my to-do list of like to go back and like finish up all that DLC I bought, like the Beyond Light stuff. But it's like, but like you said, it is impossible to fit Destiny 2 in, even with like the faster load times and stuff like that on the PS5 that cut down a little bit on the like sort of, it's like, okay, I gotta load a Destiny 2, gotta log into the character, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's like the onboarding to doing anything in Destiny 2, it's extensive enough that it feels like the only way for you to play the game is for that to be the game that you are playing. Whereas with like Genshin Impact, like, if even when it gets grindy, and part of like the design is like it needs to get grindy for the game to function. It says like they get smartly designed in that way, like mobile games are. But it's like, if I want to go do a run through and defeat like the 4 bosses basically I need to get materials for my 4 main party members, that takes me like 15 minutes. And it's like I can load up the game, get in there, and go fight them. And there's something very satisfying about the repeatableness of how efficient I can get to that, and how like good I can get at figuring out the boss's routines, and then they get more complex and harder to beat when you get to that next stage and the adventure rank goes up. But it's like, it's not a huge time investment to just go and do that really quick. And it's like, that's kind of been my routine when I get home from work, is I load up Genshin Impact and play it for like 20 to 30 minutes, and just do some of those bosses and be like, okay, that's my time at the game. I'm going to log off. I'm going to go look at something else, or get like watch a show or whatever it is. And like, the game is just designed to fit into your life wherever you can put it, and it's got as much to give as it needs for you to like spend a whole weekend on it if you want to, or you can spend as little as you need to in a day and still feel like you're getting some like fun interaction with the game that is doing some like maxi level progress that you are working towards at all times. That it's just like, it's so tightly designed in that way that I hope that more people are kind of like seeing the ways that this kind of design stuff on the mobile games, like the advantages that brings, and how like rewarding that can be, and how like expansive that can be for what video games are, rather than like, I think some people are still stuck in the mindset of like, it has to be like a proper console game, or it has to be like, it has to come from that like $60, $70, whatever it is kind of purchase, for it to be worthwhile. And like that, I hope this is starting to chip away at that mindset, because I'm seeing it happen more with like in the community, even if it hasn't hit the mainstream media yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also just want to give it a bit of praise. So I obviously started playing this game while I was home in Colorado for the holidays, and I had a different TV I was playing it on than my main nice 4K HDR set I have here at my apartment. So when I got back to my apartment and plugged in Genshin Impact, my jaw literally dropped seeing the colors on this game on a full, beautiful HDR set. This game has some of the best use of color I have ever seen. Oh my god. It is definitely, it's a similar quality to what Breath of the Wild does, but even a little like bright. It's more anime inflected.
Yeah.
So it's a little brighter, and just obviously it's on the PS5, so it's a nice, it's, the game's got a little bit of technical jank that you can feel from the mobile side of things, in some like hitches that'll happen, and sometimes things don't load in right, but it's a minor thing, and it is just such a gorgeous fucking game to behold. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
Particularly the PS5 version just looks so clean. It's something where I think the game, it's one of the most successful translations of like 2D anime style into a 3D game that's not like ArcSys works like fighting games, which still take place on a 2D plane, so they kind of cheat the 3D. Like, it's a full proper 3D game, but it really feels like they have captured that very like Sword Art Online-esque, like modern anime fantasy kind of aesthetic. So yeah, it just like has this very crisp, gorgeous, like bright color, very like sort of uplifting sort of aesthetic to the world. Yeah, I find it very pleasing to look at. Like, along within like the music being so good, is just this very like pleasing aesthetic package. To kind of like just, I think I described the game once last year as like it feels like putting on a warm blanket. And it's like all that aesthetic stuff has that quality to it.
Sean, I forgot to tell you this story. This is fun. So before I left for Iowa, I was taking care of my nephew, my sister's baby. She had this baby a couple months ago, so he's like 4 months old. And I was taking care of him, and she recommended I put on some music because the baby likes just some nice, comforting music in the background. And so I immediately, my parents' TV had Spotify on it, so I brought up the Liyue soundtrack and just started playing that. Mwah, the baby loved it. Perfect. It's just the perfect, like, that music is good in so many different contexts. It's become like one of my favorite, like, just study tracks or whatever. But like, if you want the like nice relaxing baby music that is not like annoying Rafiki baby music or whatever, this is like the perfect kind of thing to do. And I very much laughed watching the baby like smile to the Liyue soundtrack.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I will, like, if I get home and I'm tired and I'm like, I need to just like lay down for like 10 minutes, I will just throw that soundtrack on Spotify and just lay down on the couch with like a pillow, just like close my eyes for like not even really take a nap, just like relax for like 10 minutes. Yeah, no, it's, I mean, you know, I talked about the soundtrack a lot on Game of the Year, but it is, I think it's just like one of the best game soundtracks of the last few years. I've continued to listen to it actively for now like 5 or 6 months at this point. Ever since I started playing the game, and yeah, it is so good.
And man, it's so exciting to think about. You know, this year we're probably going to get another like continent in the game, and there's so much to come, and it's fun. Yeah,
the next continent is going to be. I don't think we're going to get it until like late spring, but it's going to be like the Japan influenced continent Inazuma. So that's
so cool.
Be
thinking about what they did with like China with Liyue. Oh man, that's exciting. Okay. Can't wait. Yeah, we'll either have to like find a way to put it on Game of the Year list again, or just create a separate category of the Genshin Impact Yearly Excellence Award.
I mean, honestly, Jonathan, I was looking at what games are coming out this year, and I think I'm going to have to just make the choice on my list to say, if it's a game that got its PS5 version that came out this year, I'm going to probably have to consider it, because I think a lot of games are going to get delayed out of 2021. So I think it is a not insignificant chance that Genshin Impact will be in my top 10.
Yeah, because this is the year where we might feel the COVID squeeze. We didn't feel it last year because games were already being made, but yeah.
Yeah, because now this is like games were like in the middle of their development when the pandemic hit, rather than they were like about to go gold, which is what it was for a lot of the games in 2020.
Yeah, that's happened. We're starting to see that with TV now, too, is finally slowing down. You know, Netflix is only putting out 50 shows a week instead of 100 that they make in their fucking sweatshops. All right. Anyway, thank you all for listening. We'll figure out... I'm not sure exactly what we're doing next week because of just my time with... We're either going to do a Batman episode or a Gundam episode, probably. We'll figure it out. It'll be exciting.
We will do a podcast, probably. Hopefully. We should.